Hi, it's Gene from Avstar. I can sit here literally and do this all day long. Bring your climate scientists to me, okay? If you really have an argument that you believe that CO2 is driving up our climate and making it warmer on our Earth, and that you believe mankind is responsible for that, then, go and bring your climate scientists to me and let me deal with them. Right, somebody in the comment section, Evo Labs, has provided a link showing the daily average CO2. So let's go and have a look at the chart and see what we can make of that. So here's the chart. Obviously you can see who's produced the chart. It's NOAA, and right next to their little badge you can see on the bottom right hand corner the date. It's the 16th of July 2023. I'm looking at the scale on the bottom, but the point is this: what I've done with the red lines is I've just marked from 2014 to 2023, and I've marked in blue the levels of CO2 so that we can get an average. Like this line is showing a lovely little trend, isn't it, going up, indicating that CO2 is rising. And of course, with that they will say that the global temperature is rising. Let's just look at the CO2 levels to see if we can get a realistic interpretation of how they're increasing. Well, according to my calculations, and you can see the scales on this chart, goes up in increments of 2 on the left hand side. So each one of those marks between 380 and 390 is 2 parts per million. So on the bottom is the date, on the right hand side we've got parts per million, and what we've got from 2014 to 2023 is 9 years worth of increases, according to NOAA, of CO2 in parts per million. It works out that from 2014 to 2023 there's a rise by 22 parts per million. You can check my results if you want, the scales are all there. So in 9 years there's a rise of 22 parts per million. So if we want to work out by how many the average over the years increase, it's simple, isn't it? 22 divided by 9 and we get 2.4 parts per million per year. So if we times that by 200, shouldn't come as a surprise that we get 240 parts per million. And why would we first times it by 100 at the worst level case scenario? That's what we're saying, is if it's gone up like it has in this nice neat line for the last 9 years, then surely this trend should have been going back for the last 100 years. Well, in fact, we should be going back a lot longer than 100 years, because the Industrial Revolution began in 1760. And if the Industrial Revolution was the beginning of the start of mankind increasing CO2, then we should go back a lot longer. But let's just go back 100 years and see how much it increases. Well, we find by doing that simple math, it's increased by 240 parts per million. I want to show you another chart now. And I think the chart itself should be clear, but I'll show it anyhow, and explain something to you. So what I've done on this chart is I've went back not 100 years, because NOAA, as we've just found out, NOAA's data shows that it would have risen 240 parts per million. I've gone back 50,000 years to the last glacial period, and since then CO2 has not risen by 200 parts per million in 50,000 years. Yet NOAA, according to their trend, are showing that CO2 rises in just 100 years by 240 parts per million. And this is what I'm saying to people, you can't make this stuff up. It's a complete and utter joke what's coming out of these departments that are funded by your taxpayers' money, by your very money. You're paying for this idiocy. It's lunacy. It's incredible what they are pumping out, and people are absolutely 100% believing what they say. And the reason for that is because they won't do no simple fact checking for themselves. I've just showed you right here CO2 has risen less than 200 parts per million in 50,000 years. Noah are claiming that in 100 years it rises by 240 parts per million. You know, if you're prepared and happy to pay your taxpayers' money for that sort of science, then you have no place on this channel. I want you to unsubscribe right now, because you don't deserve any truth whatsoever. Here's the difference. You've got no choice but to pay Noah to feed you that sort of BS. You have a choice here to support, and it's not mandatory. There's a link down there if you want to do that. It's entirely up to you. But you know what? 99% of the people don't support. That's what my beef is today. That's what I've been trying to get over to, you know, the majority of our subscribers over this weekend, but they don't see it. It's like they just don't get it. Why would you allow your money to be taken off you and in return given such nonsense back, when you don't have to give me anywhere near what you give these organisations by no choice? You can just simply support it with whatever you feel. Can you imagine you going to work today and saying to your boss, give me what you feel my worth is today? What do you think he's going to do? It won't be long before he turns around to you and says, I don't think he was worth anything today, but please come back tomorrow. That's what we're dealing with, that sort of mentality. We just can't get through to people, you know, that this is a rare place to come and get your truth from. You know, there it is in plain daylight for you. CO2 has not gone up by 200 parts per million in the last 50,000 years. There it is, can't be no clearer than that. There it is. And I showed you what Noah put out yesterday. According to their predictions, in the last 100 years CO2 went up by 240 parts per million. This is what we're dealing with. Look at the great big circle I've drew on this temperature curve over the last 15,000 years for you, because if you look at the present global warming position on this chart in that big circle, you'll find that we are at the lowest temperature in the last 8,000 odd years. Your climatologists of today are not mentioning the medieval warm period for a specific reason. They're not talking about the Roman warm period for a specific reason, and they won't mention the Eleusinian warm period for that very same reason. It's because all these times going back over the last 8,000 years were clearly warmer than what they are today. CO2 has no effect on driving temperatures on this planet whatsoever. It's a trace gas, and what I explained in a couple of videos ago was that we could use it as a litmus test, not just an ordinary litmus test, but an air trigger litmus test, which means the very slightest touch on that trigger will release the round, the bullet. Just a hair trigger will release that bullet, you know, slightest press. Why did I say that? Because CO2 is a trace gas. It's hardly measurable in our atmosphere. It doesn't cover even 0.5%. So if something is affecting that 0.5% in our atmosphere, and that thing in the atmosphere, CO2 in this case, is hardly abundant in the atmosphere, then we can use that as a gauge to know whether we are going back, as is predicted over the last 100,000 year cycles. You know, we know where we are right now. You can see where we are here. The Younger Dryas was the end of the last glacial period, and we are at the last days of the interglacial period. We can use CO2 as an air trigger litmus test for that. And if we see CO2 dropping, as we have, which is not pointed out by, for some reason, NOAA's chart. They've not mentioned over the last 12 months that CO2 has dropped, but if you go over to poleshiftnews.com, look at Earth Health at a glance, and just take the time out to write. I know a lot of you ain't going to do this, but if you did, just write down all the readings that we've took over the last year and put them in Excel and do a chart on it. You'll see that it's falling. And there's our air trigger that shows us that the climate is actually cooling. But we don't need to do that. We can go and have a look at the Arctic ice content and have a look at how much ice has been rebounded in the last 10 years, because it will show us that the ice has rebounded by 1.8 million square kilometres. Huge mass of ice has rebounded in the Arctic Circle alone. We don't need that. If we want to just rely on the historical record of based on the core samples, it shows us that what we are now experiencing is as is expected at this point in the cycle. And these are not new cycles. These cycles go back millions of years on our planet's history of climate. And what does it show us? That we are returning back into a glacial period. And you can see the difference on this chart between a glacial period and that time temperature expected in that time period, and you can see what happens in an interglacial period as the temperature increases. It's short-lived, trust me. If you go back on the last chart, you'll see how much an interglacial period is actually short-lived. But yet these organisations are still pumping this ludicrous information out there, and people are still believing in it because it comes from, as they proclaim, a reputable organisation. Well, I ask you the very question, how reputable are they? Based on this video that you've just watched, they suggest that in 100 years 240 parts per million will be added into our atmosphere, when I showed you the truth. Not even in 50,000 years did it increase by 200 parts per million. So, here's the simple deal. You can have your money taken off you without any opposition at all. You've got no choice. They will take your money and give it to organisations like that and pump back garbage to you. Or you can help support a small observatory that is dedicated to giving you the truth. But that means you have to, by choice, fill out that form down there in the link and make a contribution. It's entirely up to you. You know, you're in control of the information in which you want to receive. You either want to support an observatory which is trying to inform millions of people, or you can just carry on allowing these organisations to tax the living daylights out of you based on a load of lies, and at the same time misinform you. Simple as that. You know, that's what we're trying to get across to people. You know, why wouldn't you want to support? Links down there if you want to. Guys, say what I usually do. You know, have an amazing day. As always, bye for now.